Dubrow Suspicion Files.
Let's go back in time. It's Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. A family home is engulfed in flames in the dead of night. It seems like a horrible, horrible tragedy. But what unfolds from those ashes becomes one of America's most haunting mysteries, all revolving around a single, chilling question that just seems impossible to answer.
And that's really the heart of it all, isn't it? We're not just talking about a lack of bodies. We're talking about a complete and total absence of any physical trace whatsoever. So, you see, this isn't just a story about a fire. It's a story that seems to defy the laws of science and points to something much, much darker. So let's meet the family at the center of this story, George and Jenny Sodder and their kids. Now, the parents and 4 of the children, they managed to get out. But the 5 middle kids, who were sleeping up in the attic, well, they were never seen again. Their names were Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty. Now, the official story was that this was all just a tragic accident. But when you really start to look at the timeline at what happened that night, a very different and very disturbing picture starts to form. You know, this wasn't just a string of bad luck. It was a series of events so specific they feel intentional. Okay, let's just walk through this hour because it's critical. At 12:30 in the morning, Jenny, the mother, gets this super weird phone call. Some woman on the line is asking for a person she's never heard of, and there's a party going on in the background. Strange, right? Then, half an hour later, she hears a loud bang on the roof. Maybe some kind of fire starter? By 1:30, the house is a full-blown inferno, and the main way out of that attic completely gone. So the family scrambles out, but they realize the 5 kids are still trapped up there in the attic. The father, George Sodder, he doesn't even hesitate. He sprints to the side of the house for his ladder, his heavy extension ladder that he always kept in that exact spot to try and get up to the attic window. But the ladder isn't there. It's just gone. And it wasn't just, misplaced in the dark. It was later found tossed in an embankment almost 75 feet away from the house. There's no way it got there by accident. Someone physically moved it, taking away the most obvious escape route. All right, plan B. George owned 2 big coal trucks for his business. He gets this desperate but brilliant idea to drive one of them right up to the house and climb on top of it to reach the window. And this is where it gets just completely unbelievable. Neither of the trucks will start. Not one, but both of them. They were running perfectly just hours before. George is in a panic. He's trying again and again, but the engines just won't turn over. His second rescue plan, sabotaged. The fire is raging. Both of his rescue plans have failed, so what's the next logical step? You gotta get help. George's daughter, Marion, runs over to a neighbor's place to call the fire department. But she can't get a dial tone. The line is dead. And investigators later figured out why. The phone line hadn't melted in the fire. No. Someone had climbed a utility pole with a pair of pliers and had physically cut their line to the outside world. They'd actually cut the power line by mistake first before finding and severing the phone line. This was no accident. This was a plan. Okay, so even with all of that, the official conclusion was that the children simply died in the fire. But this, right here, is where the whole mystery just collides head-on with cold, hard science. Because the lack of any evidence at all, well, that's the most powerful evidence there is.
Let's just break this down for a second. A typical house fire, even a really hot one, it burns for a relatively short time, maybe 45 minutes before the structure collapses. A professional crematorium, which is literally designed to break down a human body, uses much higher temperatures for hours. And even then, it doesn't just vaporize bones. It leaves behind fragments that still have to be ground down. So the idea that a 45-minute house fire could do what a 3-hour professional cremation can't, it's just not possible.
0. That's the number. 0 human bones. No skull fragments, no parts of a spine, not a single tooth. Out of 5 children, absolutely nothing was left behind. That fact alone should have completely changed the investigation from accident to abduction right then and there. So you've got a scientific impossibility and a whole pile of evidence of sabotage. You'd think that would kick off a massive investigation, right? Instead, the official response was so inadequate that it starts to look less like incompetence and more like an intentional cover-up. Just look at the facts here. First, the fire department took 7 hours to show up for a fire that was only 2.5 miles away. By the time they get there, it's just a cold pile of rubble. Then, the search they conducted lasted a mere 2 hours, no real forensic sifting of the debris. And, get this, the same insurance salesman who had threatened George Sodder ended up on the coroner's jury that ruled the whole thing an accident. Unbelievable. This might be the most bizarre part of the whole cover-up. Years later, because the family just wouldn't let it go, the fire chief suddenly found a heart in the debris that he claimed belonged to one of the children. But when they had it analyzed, turns out it was fresh beef liver that had never even been near a fire. The chief later admitted he planted it, hoping it would make the family stop asking questions. It was a complete and total fraud. So if the children weren't in the fire, where did they go? The family was convinced they were kidnapped, and the motive? Well, it seems to be tied directly to George Sodder himself. And then, more than 20 years later, a single piece of mail arrived that blew the whole case wide open again. You see, George Sodder was an Italian immigrant who was very, very openly critical of the dictator Mussolini, and that made him some enemies. He'd even received a direct threat from that insurance salesman, who told him his house would go up in smoke and his kids would be destroyed because of his anti-Mussolini comments. And after the fire, there were multiple witnesses who claimed they saw the children with adults of Italian extraction, which fits the profile of a politically motivated kidnapping perfectly. For 2 decades, nothing. The trail was completely cold. The Sodders never, ever gave up hope. They even put up a huge billboard with the kids' pictures on it. Then, in 1967, a letter shows up addressed to Jenny. No return address, and inside, just a single photograph. The family was just stunned. The man in the picture, he looked exactly how they imagined their son Louis would look all grown up. He had the same dark, curly hair, the same nose, even the same distinct way his left eyebrow tilted. For Jenny Sodder, there was absolutely no doubt in her mind. This was her son. On the back of that photo, there was a cryptic, handwritten note, but the real smoking gun was this string of numbers. A90132 or maybe A90135. Now, these weren't American zip codes. They were, and still are, the postal codes for Palermo, in Sicily, Italy. This was it. The piece of evidence that directly connected the disappearance of the children all the way back to Italy, and to the political tensions that likely started this whole nightmare. So what really happened to the Sodder children? The science tells us they did not die in that fire. The evidence screams of a carefully planned sabotage and abduction, and a single photograph suggests that at least one of them was alive decades later, possibly in Sicily. Was this just a heartbreaking accident on Christmas Eve? Or was it a brutal crime born from political hatred that remains, even to this day, completely unsolved?